Dos, tres. Uno, dos, tres. Sí, dos, tres. Uno, dos, tres. Hola, hola. Sí, dos, tres.
Bien,
How it works. ¿Sabes cómo funciona? ¿Sabes cómo funciona?
no,
Ya, que tampoco sabe cómo funciona. Ay, hombre, eso no. That they will, they will translate what he's saying. But the rest is going to be in English. It's just that introduction. Let's see if it works.
yes. Bien,
Okay.
muy buenas tardes
Thank
a todas y a todos. Es un gran placer y un gran honor tenerlos acá y también tener a nuestra invitada Deborah Eisenberg. Esta es la cuarta sesión de este año del programa La Ciudad y las Palabras, en conjunto con Chai Editora. Y en esta ocasión tenemos a la gran cuentista Deborah Eisenberg, que será entrevistada por la escritora y cuentista chilena María José Navia. Eisenberg fue la ganadora del premio RIA de cuentos en el año 2000. También ha sido merecedora de premios como el Within Award, una beca Guggenheim y el premio O. Henry. El año 2007, Eisenberg fue admitida en la Academia Estadounidense de las Artes y las Letras y en 2009 se le fue otorgado una beca del MacArthur y también ganó el premio Penn T. Faulkner en el año 2011 por una ficción llamada The Collected Stories of Deborah Eisenberg. También recibió el premio Penn Malamud a la excelencia en cuentos en mayo del año 2015. María José Navia estudió literatura y lingüística hispánica en la Pontificia Universidad Católica de Chile y una maestría en Humanidades y Pensamiento Social en la Universidad de Nueva York, NYU. Es doctora en Literatura y Estudios Culturales por la Universidad de Georgetown y desde el año 2016 es profesora de Literatura en la Facultad de Letras de nuestra universidad. Algunos de sus relatos han sido traducidos al inglés, al francés, al ruso y han formado parte de antologías en Chile, España, México, Bolivia, Rusia y Estados Unidos. Queremos, por lo tanto, agradecerles a ambas por estar hoy con nosotros y también agradecer a todos quienes han apoyado nuestro programa. A Roberto Santander, coordinador editorial, Pablo Retamales, de La Tercera, María Teresa Cárdenas, del diario El Mercurio, Pablo Bravo, colaborador del diario El Mostrador, Silvana Angelini, del Ministerio de Cultura, Pablo Ramírez, de Radio Duna. Y también, por supuesto, a las empresas que hacen posible el programa La Ciudad de las Palabras. La Tercera, Copec, Viva Leer Copec, Grupo Security, Tironi y Asociados, Gimsa, Electroproductos e Email, también como Librería Sucé y el Hotel Sheraton. Quisiéramos, por supuesto, agradecer a las autoridades de la facultad, al decano, a los directores de escuela y a todos quienes colaboran con nuestro programa y nuestro doctorado, a Andrea Masuero, a Marcela de Marías y a todas las personas que nos apoyan, especialmente también a Héctor Soto, que siempre ha sido un puente entre La Tercera y nuestro programa. Y por cierto, agradecer también a la gestora de la Ciudad de las Palabras, Loreto Villarroel. Solo terminar diciendo que al final de la presentación habrá firma de libros y por lo tanto no me queda más que dejarlos con María José Navia y Deborah Eisenberg. Muchas gracias.
Well, hello, everyone. So I'm gonna be doing this in English. I know you have translation available. I'm really excited to be here, honored and grateful and happy. I told her already, but I'm a big fan of Deborah Eisenberg's work. I've been a big fan for years now. I even teach one of her stories in a class that I teach in Letras, which is Twilight of the Superheroes. And I see some of my students there, so extra credit, and they're really excited to be here. And it was a secret that you were coming. And so when I was teaching your story, it was like, I was really intense and really wanted them to love the story as much as I do without telling them that you were coming. And then when it was okay to announce it, they were really happy. So I'm really happy to see you here, and probably you will have questions at the end. So this is Twilight of the Superheroes. And thank you to Loreto Villarroel for making this wish come true. I feel like Christmas. But anyway, so I don't know if you want to say a couple of words first, or we can start with a conversation.
I really just want to thank everybody. It is a real honor for me to be here. And above and beyond that, it's also a very intense and almost uncanny experience to be really, writers, the act of writing requires extreme privacy. It's a private act. We sit alone in a room in our pajamas. And here I am on what is actually the other side of the world to me. And with readers whose language I don't even share, but owing to the magic work of my translators, I can say these very private things. And I'm very happy to be here. I'm very grateful, and I thank you all. So thank you.
Thank you for that. And also just a quick mention to the publishing house that brought us Deborah Eisenberg's books today. They're available outside. So a couple of years ago, Twilight of the Superheroes was published in Spain, I think, right? By this publishing house. But now last year, maybe the year before, 3 of your books came out. They are a selection of the stories that are here in the collected stories of Deborah Eisenberg. And also your book, Your Duck is My Duck, was translated as, or given a new title, Taj Mahal, which is the title of one of your stories.
Yes.
Right? Maybe we can start with that tiny anecdote. What about that change in that title? How was that discussion? Why did you decide? Or Federico Falco, a fantastic Argentinian writer, is the translator of Deborah Eisenberg's works. So how was that discussion?
I haven't the faintest idea.
Oh,
Um,
thank you, Federico.
I wonder, am I audible? Am I?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. Or bad, whatever.
Depends.
But I have no grasp of why something works or doesn't work in one language or another. And I know that I had actually been told before that translation was done that the title of the book initially, Your Duck is My Duck, doesn't work in Spanish.
Mhm.
I don't know why.
Yeah, me neither.
It's the same words. But I trust my publishers and my translators completely. So I believe it. And the title of the collection, which is the absolute parallel to the English language, Your Duck is My Duck, is the collection called Taj Mahal. And that's the latest of my collections.
Yes. So this program that brought you here, that brought us this fantastic joy of having you here, is called La Ciudad y las Palabras, so the city and words, right? And when the organizers gave this interview or this talk, the title, the city in stories, right? So maybe we could start talking about how important is the city in your work? So New York is everywhere, and I think you approach New York from different perspectives: the perspectives of immigrants, the perspectives of people who look at the shiny lights of Manhattan, right, with a lot of hope, but also stories like Mermaids, right, where we have that idea a little bit contaminated, right? This New York that is also a very filthy place, and etc. So how would you say, is New York a protagonist of your stories? Has that changed throughout the years or not?
Well, I've been told that New York is a protagonist of my stories. And I'm not really surprised that it would seem to be, because I am not from New York. And I came to New York very intentionally, like many people of my generation when I was young, because New York, well, I grew up in the middle of the United States, in the middle of the century, and it was a very conventional, almost, I would say, rather repressive time. And I couldn't wait to get out. And New York was, I suppose it was really in a heyday at that time. It was a poor city. Now it is a very wealthy city, but it was not then. Of course, there were wealthy people who lived there, but you could come there, and there were many generations of European immigrants who had fled from Europe during one crisis or another. And so the city had a basis of layers of immigration: Italian, Irish, Jewish, Eastern European, many people from many places. And a lot of young people and artists came to New York, partly for that, the relief from the homogeneity of the rest of the country, and the liveliness of and many Asians, of course, a lot of Chinese people, and the liveliness of the city. And also the fact that it was extremely tolerant, unlike much of the United States, much of anywhere, I think, at any time. So we were drawn, I think, not so much by a dream of wealth or success, but of a kind of joy and freedom. And as you say, the city, it's a very all big cities are very moody, I think. And Uh, New York, of course, became a center of finance, and now it is a very, very wealthy city, and a lot of the vitality has been snuffed out by just the sheer wealth of some people.
So if we can talk a little bit about Twilight of the Superheroes. So Twilight of the Superheroes was one of the first stories that came out that dealt with 9/11, right? At the time, so it was 2006, I think, when this book was published. There were a couple of novels coming out, an anthology that was organized by a professor of NYU, I remember, and you write this story. I listened to one of your interviews. I think it was an interview that you gave in The Strand with George Saunders.
Oh, yes.
And you read from this collection, and they asked you about it, and you mentioned how it took you 3 years to write this story. You've mentioned before that it takes you about a year to write a story, that you're a slow writer. And one thing that caught my attention that you mentioned in that interview is that you said that for the very first time you started taking notes when you wrote Twilight of the Superheroes. So I was wondering if you can tell us a little bit about how this story came to be, the first images that maybe got to your head, and how those notes worked in the making of this story.
Yes, sure. This is all being translated as we speak.
Hopefully.
That's absolutely extraordinary. Yes.
I'm talking too fast.
No,
Okay, I can.
I'm talking too confusedly.
Oh,
so-
no, you're perfect. You're the queen today.
Oh,
I
yes.
told you.
Well, I'm handing that to you.
No, please.
But yes, of course, it was a very, very shocking event, and it remains a sort of fulcrum, a horrible fulcrum, but a moment when the the image of the United States changed very much for many of us who lived there. I mean, not so much for me, because although I was shocked, I wasn't very surprised. But I would say in general, people were just astonished to have this act of hatred committed against them. They had no idea why, what was going on, and so on. But it was a very fluid moment in New York. People, there was a sort of beautiful, almost in this grotesqueness. There was a beautiful couple of weeks when everybody was talking to each other. I mean, on the street, in restaurants, all over, everybody was talking and saying, well, why did this happen? What is it? What does it mean? How can we change? What is different? But everything was changing very, very, very fast. And you could sort of feel that on the one hand, it was possible that there would be an evaluation or reevaluation of policy, foreign policy, and on the other, that we would rush to some kind of irrational war, which of course is what we did. But I felt everybody was feeling so much, and I was feeling so much, and I knew that I was going to very quickly codify what I had been feeling and what everybody had been feeling, all the different feelings, and that I would lose the living reality of it. And I had no idea how to write about it or whether to write about it, but it seemed to me to be very important to capture the feelings and impressions and ideas as they went just flying by. And so I just kept notes. It's the only time I've kept notes, but everything was just changing by the minute. And so then I had, the index cards all over the floor and figured out how to put it together and what it was. But that took a long time.
So I want to read just a super tiny excerpt of that story too. So there's a moment when it says, the plane struck, tearing through the curtain of that blue September morning, exposing the dark world that lay right behind it, of populations ruthlessly exploited, inflamed with hatred, and tired of waiting for change to happen by. And then a little bit later it says, and I think this is very particular of your work, how you examine with this beautiful attention the words themselves. I think in most or even every one of your stories, there's this moment when you truly examine the words that you're using or that are being used as shields that hide things or that protect us from things. So this is another little excerpt. It says, the wars in the East were hidden behind a thicket of language. Patriotism, democracy, loyalty, freedom, the words bounced around. I love this materiality of words, right? The words bounced around, changing purpose as if they were made out of some funny plastic. What did they actually refer to? It seemed that they all might refer to money. And one last, New York had once been the threshold of an impregnable haven. Then the city had become in an instant the country's open wound. And now it was the occasion, the pretext for killing and theft and legislative horrors all over the world. The air stank from particulate matter, chemicals and asbestos and blood and scorched bone. People developed coughs and strange rashes. So these are just a couple of glimpses to your story, but I was and we're gonna leave Twilight of the Superheroes. I promise. I have lots of other post-it notes in other stories, but I was wondering of this mix of characters. So we have some young people who are in the city. They're living in a relative's apartment that has this perfect view of the towers, which of course will be a very difficult situation later on. And you have this very quirky character of a superhero, right? Passivity Man, who is a character who decides not to do things, right? It's almost like a Bart Livy figure in this story. I don't know if it was something that you wanted to bring to the story, or Bart Livy was never in your mind.
He wasn't, Bartleby was certainly not in the forefront of my mind, but I don't suppose Bartleby ever leaves anybody's mind completely. And well, that was the idea of just refusing to participate in an exploitative system. This is Passivity Man is a comic book figure, and his superhero quality is sloth or laziness or a refusal to get involved. But this comic book is a comic strip that is written by one of the young characters. And it's, just a sort of comic strip that would appear in an underground paper or a student newspaper that is being written by one of the characters. So he pops up now and again.
Yeah. So continuing with the representation of the city, and then I want to ask more questions about the craft and of writing short stories. But if we think about the city, the representation of different cities, in your case, we usually get New York as we were discussing before. But I'm always curious about writers as readers, right? The type of books that they are seduced by, or that they want to read. In your case, also you are a professor, right? Or you used to teach at Columbia University, right? So my question is, how if so you say that other people say of your work that the city is a protagonist. Do you see that representation of New York City or maybe other American cities present in other writers? Who would you recommend as fellow writers who are dealing with this representation of American cities?
You know, the minute somebody says to me, "What are you reading?"
Uh-huh.
I
You forget
can't-
all the books.
totally, totally. People's a book. What is that?
This is a very good book.
So I'm not. I really can't think of. I mean, I know that I read things all the time with New York or other cities in them, but I honestly, I'm telling you, I cannot remember a thing I've ever read in my whole life.
Okay. I remember things that you've read. I remember in one of the many interviews that I read, maybe it was that the same one with George Saunders, that you mentioned that one of the stories that you assign to your students is Earthquake in Chile, which I thought
love that. Yes.
was really interesting, right? Heinrich von Kleist, and he,
Yes.
I think he never came to Chile, right? He's just imagining this place, and it's about an earthquake, which it suits us, right? It makes sense. So why do you assign that book then, or that story?
Well, maybe I should start by saying that I'm not a scholar and I'm never studied writing or literature, but I always read a lot when I was young, and I assign in a reading class that I habitually was privileged to teach, I assigned short stories rather than novels so that we could look very, very, very closely at things. In other words, it's pretty easy to waffle on about, Finnegan's Wake or War and Peace or something. But I really wanted the students to pay very close attention to how a piece of writing became itself. So I don't really have any interest in stories as a genre, as opposed to novels, but they're wonderful to read with a class or a group of people who feel like reading, because you do see them getting put together piece by piece. But the earthquake in Chile, which I don't, do people read that here?
Oh.
No.
Which is, again, really interesting.
I don't
Maybe
think,
we should.
I think so. I don't think people read it anywhere.
Well,
And I guess it is late 18th
Yeah.
century.
Probably. or-
Yes.
Yeah.
By Heinrich von Kleist, a German who never did go to Chile.
No.
But it is it's very, very enigmatic and very, very surprising. It just turns and turns and turns and turns. And it really is an examination of morality. And it's very intricate, it's very elegant, and it's very frightening. And I highly recommend it.
Yeah. It was published in 1807. That
Oh,
was-
well
yes.
done.
Just to have.
Just
so-
guess.
Yeah. So, yeah, and I also read, and I love this piece of information, that when you were a girl, that you, or maybe a teenager, you carry some books around as amulets, like knighthood, which I thought was an amazing choice for an amulet. I don't know if you carry amulets around. Do you travel with books? Maybe the journalist made up that part of the
No,
article.
that's absolutely true.
Okay.
That
They
when
were amulets.
yes, I is that book Nightwood ever read here?
Yeah, probably some people.
I haven't dared read it since I was about maybe
Gina Barnes,
16,
right? Yes,
Gina
yeah.
Barnes. And I absolutely adored this book when I was 15, 16, adored it. I don't dare look at it now because I think maybe it isn't very good, but it was very intense, florid, dark, and the absolute opposite of the suburb where I grew up. And yes, I said that I carried it like a cross to ward off vampires.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did it work?
Absolutely. Here I am.
Well, magic powers. So you said that, and that breaks my heart a little, right? That you don't care about the short story I'm a huge fan of short stories. That you don't care about the short story as a genre, right? It's not a choice that you made that I'm only going to write short stories. But I'm curious about how it started. I've read in your interviews that you've said that you started writing short stories because you were quitting smoking, and it was part of that process. But also, more than the smoking part, I'm interested in how they were connected with your one and only play, right? I've heard you mention that first and only so far, right? Play, and how after writing that play, you started writing more short stories. Like it was this gateway to
It was gateway, yes.
to short stories. So how did that happen in your in your work?
Well, yes, I did start writing either because or when I stopped smoking, which I mean, I hope nobody ever has to go through anything of that sort. But I had, you might say in a way that I had avoided writing my whole life. It just, I never thought I could do it. It always seemed really like magic. And it still does to me. Writing, particularly writing fiction. But I, with great difficulty and out of the serious anguish of stopping a very, very, very heavy smoking habit, which, I mean, my entire self was created from smoke. And I had to stop and did. And it was an incredible nightmare. And that's under the tutelage of the wonderful man with whom I still live, I started writing. It was extremely difficult and painful because I really was not, well, as I'm sure that practically everybody in this room has done at least some writing, and everybody knows that it is impossible. It's to actually convey in words something that you really mean and is clear and is not empty. It's really difficult. And I didn't think I was going to be able to do it. And I didn't have any ambitions. I just wanted to get through one sentence, another sentence, another sentence. And well, the process was, I thought that if this gets boring, just
No,
stop me.
never.
Stop me.
The queen, the queen.
But I thought that I was keeping a sort of diary of going to a place where you exercise, which I'd never done in my whole life, any of, but that was related to stopping smoking also. And after about a year, I finished this kind of diary of going to this place and trying to run and trying to swim and using the locker and, you know, taking my clothes off and putting my clothes back on and that sort of thing. And I gave this document to my sweetheart, to whom I referred a moment ago. And he said, well, yeah. He said, you have written something, but you know, it's not a journalistic piece. It's not a fact piece. It's fiction. So turn it into fiction. So I turned back to this, and about another year went by in which I turned this into a kind of story and gave it back to the person to whom I'm referring. And he read it and he said, okay, you've turned it into fiction, but it's lost its life. So do it again. And I did it again. That took
another year.
Yeah. And gave it back to him. And he said, hey, you know, congratulations, you've written something. So I showed it to a friend of mine who is an actor and a director. And she said, I want to direct this as a reading at, there was a very important theater in New York at that time called the New York Shakespeare Festival, the Public Theater. I want to direct it as a reading. I said, no, it's on the page. It belongs on the page. She said, just, you know, are you a friend or what? So I gave it to her to do. She directed it as a reading while I left town. And then about a year went by, and the impresario of this theater, a man named Joe Papp, he was a great man. He put Shakespeare on in our big park, so that it was free, anybody could come and see these plays, excellent actors, beautifully directed, really wonderful. So he called me up, and I mean, like on the telephone. And he said, I want you to write a play. And I said, well, Joe, I can't write a play. And he said, no, I want you to write a play. And I will commission you. I'll give you money. I said, money. So I said, but listen, Joe, I have a waitressing job, and it's a pretty good job, and I'm a really bad waitress. And if I drop that job, nobody else is going to hire me. So I don't want to quit the job. And he said, it's okay. Drop a couple of nights a week, and I'll put you on salary. And in 5 months, you'll bring me your play. You'll write a play. I said, fine. And I was lost. I mean, I had had nothing. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to write a play or I didn't know how to do anything. I'd written one story. So, well, I'll tell you, this is just entre nous. I sort of drank a lot of grappa and slept a lot. And finally, I started writing this play, and it sort of wrote itself. And all the whole while, Joe had been saying, you know, please show me what you're working on. I don't show anybody what I'm working on ever. And I kept saying, oh, fine, I'll do that. And I never did it. So finally, when I was finished, I brought it to Joe. And he called me the week or so later, and he said, I went in to see him, and he said, I hate your play. It's really bad. It's just terrible. It's not a play. I really don't like it. And for some reason, I was extremely confident about this play. I said, oh, I think it's a good play. And it didn't bother me at all that he didn't like it. And to answer your question, which you asked quite a while ago,
happy listening to you. So
I had enjoyed this process so much that I went on and wrote
more stories.
But if it hadn't been for Joe, I don't think I would have continued. It was, even though he hated the play, it was very good luck.
Blessing in disguise.
It was.
So thank you to Joe for all of these stories. But so the story that you wrote is Days, right?
That was the first story.
The first story. And I've read some of your interviews, and you said that you don't like that story that much anymore. Is that true? Or maybe you changed your mind?
No, it's the only story of mine that many people like, but I don't.
Okay, so it's at the starting point. It's a great story. But so I just want to read the first few lines, only because it addresses what you were just talking about smoking being this important part of your life. And this is how it starts. It says, I had never known what I was like until I stopped smoking, by which time there was hell to pay for it. When the haze cleared over the charred landscape, the person I had always assumed to be behind the smoke was revealed to be a teeny weights and balances apparatus rapidly disassembling on contact with oxygen. Very, very intense story. But again, thank you for that story and for all the ones that came after that. I wanted to ask you now about how you organize your books, your collections of short stories. I mean, this is the collected stories. But if we think of Your Duck is My Duck, which is your latest collection, how do you organize the stories? Do you have a plan for them? Like to start with the one that starts a collection, it ends with a story called Recalculating, which is an interesting, like, okay, and then we start all over. I don't know. Like, do you plan that ahead or no?
No, in fact, I give my agent each story as I finish it.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
I'm not sure why.
wow.
But when I finish a story, I give it to my agent to read. She's a very good reader. And at a certain point, she says to me, well, you've written a book. So that's
how it works.
yeah, it's just, I wasn't planning to write a book. I had no particular feeling in mind. And then the publisher decides on the order. And I think you're absolutely right that it was good to end that collection with the story called Recalculating. But I never have any opinion about how the book should be structured.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't really care. But I do think that each book does have sort of its own character, although it wasn't planned.
Mm-hmm. And what about titles? Or you don't
Oh,
think about titles either?
Oh, I think about titles.
Yes.
I
You have amazing titles.
I really, really
Transactions in a foreign currency, like all that. Wow. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
No,
That's my fangirl moment.
I really, the titles are extremely important to me because I think that they're a way of indicating to the reader what your intention is, what the through line of the thing is. And if I've sometimes had the experience of thinking I've finished a story. And Recalculating is actually an excellent example of what I'm about to say. I thought I was finished with that story, and I couldn't think of a title for it. I just couldn't think of a title. And I was being driven in a car somewhere. I was in California, and a car service was driving. I mean, somebody was driving a car, and the GPS at that point, if the driver made a mistake, according to this machine, the machine would say, recalculating. And I was sitting in the back seat, desperately trying to think of a title. And I kept thinking,
that's right there.
Yes, no, stop. Please be quiet. I'm trying to think of a title. Recalculating. And I suddenly thought, oh, actually, that is what the story is about.
Yes. That
is the story. And so another piece of luck there.
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic title. I also wanted to say that, so Your Duck is My Duck. So I have the book, but I also listened to the audio version. The audiobook of Your Duck is My Duck is great. It has different narrators. One is right there. You read another story. I think Julianne Moore reads another of the stories. So how was that experience? Do you read audiobooks too?
No, and I've never been invited to. It's,
But you recorded the story in
did.
that, yes.
I think I read two of
Yes,
those
the
stories,
first one, yeah.
but it was kind of anguish because the recording sessions were very rapid, so I couldn't stop and reread. It was basically a one take situation, almost. I mean, just occasionally, if I just totally scrambled a sentence,
No.
I could stop and start. But it was way too fast for me. But I think one of the stories that I read, I think would have been quite difficult for anybody else to read. A story called The Third Tower, I think
Yeah.
would have been very difficult for anybody else to read. Not because the words are difficult, but because it is sort of a departure of mine, and the tone, I think if you just pick it up, the tone is hard to get.
Yeah, and it has all these sections, like this topic and words there work so well. I love this quotation. I use it as an epigraph for one of my books. I love it so much. It says, her teacher said she'd grow out of it, but it's only gotten worse in school. Words heating up, expanding, exploding into pictures of things, shooting off in all directions, then flaming out, leaving behind cinders and husks, a litter of tiny, empty winged corpses like scorched gnats or angels. So brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
It's amazing, right? Like how she pays so much attention to the words themselves. And in that story, it's brilliant. And Recalculating is read here by Mr. Sean, right?
Yes.
He's the one who reads Recalculating. Okay, so I'm having a great time. I could be here forever, but I know that I have to leave some space and time for questions from the audience. So if there's anyone who would like to ask Deborah Eisenberg a question, there's a microphone over there. I don't know how it works. I don't know if they have to come to here or we can pass the microphone around. Yeah? Okay, so over there.
Hi, can you hear me? Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Hi. What is appealing to you from our culture? We also have a 9/11.
Wait,
What
Yeah,
is
he's
appealing
asking
to
in
you?
English. So
I'm so confused.
what do you find appealing about our culture? And he
What
said
is
we
appealing to
also
you?
had a 9/11.
From our culture? What is appealing to you from our culture?
What
Talking about,
Yeah.
what appeals to me
Yeah,
in
yeah.
culture, the whole thing. I mean, I have to tell you, I'm quite ignorant about Chile in particular. I mean, this is my second day, so
Okay.
but I do have a long-standing and generalized love of Latin America. I mean, Latin America is huge and various, but the first place I ever loved in my life was Mexico, which I was on a short trip with my parents when I was 9. And it seemed absolutely superior to me in every way. I mean, I was 9, but the dignity, the colors, the hush, the way people were with their children, the way children participated in a way in life was all extremely exciting and beautiful to me. And I've spent a little time in Central America, and the countries I've been in are very, very different from each other, but all very, very fascinating to me. And I do feel drawn to Latin America, in general, although there's so much I haven't seen.
You also assign Bolaño in your course. I think you also mentioned.
Yes. Oh, I mean, of course, the whole United States went mad for Bolaño, and I did too.
Another.
Hola,
Yes.
acá. No voy a hablar en inglés porque no me voy a avergonzar. Hay traductor. Quiero agradecer primero a Chay por traer los cuentos de Deborah a Chile y a Argentina. Y en este caso preguntar a Deborah si has leído algún cuento de tu traductor al español, de Federico Falco.
Well, I was very fortunate to read a collection of Federico Falco's short stories, Perfect Cemetery, it's called in
Yes.
English. And they're beautiful stories. He's very distinctive writer, very, very distinctive tone, very distinctive style. It's just, you wouldn't mistake it for anybody else. Yes, that was good luck that I was able to read a collection.
Anybody else? Oh, over there. My students.
Hola, buenas noches. Mi pregunta es un poco simple, creo. Como estuvieron hablando, es muy difícil escribir en general y por ese motivo quisiera saber si tienes algún consejo para los nuevos escritores o para los escritores jóvenes, especialmente en el cuento, cualquier consejo para escribir mejor o para escribir algo, lo que sea.
I hope so. I mean, this might not be helpful, but I think it's sort of important. As I was saying much earlier, it is extremely difficult to write. And I think it's easy to get discouraged because if you aspire, I mean, I assume that if you are interested in writing fiction, it's because you've read fiction that you love. And it's very difficult to do something that really fulfills your aspirations, and it's very hard to do something that, I mean, there are some people who can just sit down and write well. I'm certainly not. So this advice is advice that I wish, well, it sort of was given to me, but it is supposed to be hard. And if you're feeling frustrated because it's so hard, it's not because you're not suited to write. It's because it's really hard to do it well, really hard. And so you're probably not going to be, statistically, you're very unlikely to be the person who sits down and writes like a goddess. I mean, it's very rare. And I don't know if you're accustomed yet to revising, but that is the most satisfying thing in the world, because you can, and I'm seeing agreement there. It's when you sit down, you write whatever you write, a paragraph or a page, and you think, oh, that was great. I've done such a good job. You look at it the next day and it's terrible. And instead of just throwing it out and crying as I used to and freaking out in every way, if you sit there and you look at what you've done, you read it, just even the first sentence, you read it over and over. Something's wrong. What's wrong? It's not very clear. How can I make it clearer? It's not very interesting. How can maybe you move a comma? Maybe you change around a phrase. Maybe you think, oh, the reason it's not very clear is because I don't really know yet what I mean. I have to think about what I mean, and then I can simplify it and say it simply and clearly, which takes nerve, because sometimes what you mean seems very embarrassing. It doesn't seem like enough. Writing is very embarrassing. But if you just sort of face it and think, I want to say what I mean, whether it seems interesting to me or not, whether I think other people will be interested or not, I have to face the fact that this is what I mean and try to say it. And really, you can make things 1,000 times better if you just keep patiently and kind of courageously working at it.
Yeah, I want to add that if you want more of that advice, I highly recommend Deborah Eisenberg's interview in The Art of Fiction for the Paris Review. In there, you have this long interview where you mention some of that. I just want to read a super quick paragraph. It says, "But the real fun of writing, for me at least, is the experience of making a set of givens yield. There's an incredibly inflexible set of instruments or vocabulary or grammar, the abstract symbols on paper, the limitations of your own powers of expression. You write something down and it's awkward, trivial, artificial, approximate. But with effort, you can get it to become a little flexible, a little transparent. You can get it to open up and expose something lurking there beyond the clumsy thing you first put down. When you add a comma or add or subtract a word and the thing reacts and changes, it's so exciting that you forget how absolutely terrible writing feels a lot of the time." Yes.
It is exciting. It's great.
It's an amazing interview. I don't know if there's someone else.
Hello. My question is, we've been talking about short stories today, but I want your point of view regarding sort of like a comparison, short stories versus a novel.
Oh, I just love them both. if they're good. I don't have any feeling that one is superior to the other. But generally, I would say novels require a large propulsive narrative. That's a total generalization, but I myself, I'm quite interested in reading novels, but I'm not interested in making that kind of thing. I generally prefer to layer things up. These are not mutually exclusive categories, but it's just generalization.
Thank you.
I know that you have sense of humor. So my question is, what's the difference between Deborah Eisenberg and Alice Munro?
And
Alice Munro,
Alice Munro.
both short story writers. I don't know what.
Well, I guess we're just quite different. I do very much admire her stories, love them. Sorry, I wish I could give you a real answer, but
Maybe one last question.
What?
One last question.
Okay.
Gracias. Bueno, hablaste harto de este proceso difícil de haber dejado de fumar. Hay un cuento de Alejandro Zambra, chileno, donde él también habla de cuando intentó tratar de dejar de fumar, no lo logró. Y él habla de que cuando trataba de escribir sin fumar, encontraba que era peor escritor. Tú partiste escribiendo sin fumar. Y de alguna manera, ¿crees que hubiera sido una escritora diferente fumando? Yo me imagino, yo también soy exfumadora y creo que hay un tema de el ritmo que te da el cigarro, esto mismo que hablas tú de revisar acompañado de este ritmo de prender uno, otro. ¿Cómo crees tú que hubiera sido si hubieras seguido fumando y escribiendo?
I could not have continued smoking and writing because smoking for me was a substitute for any sort of expression or acting in any way. The narcotic was very important to me, the nicotine. And I happen to be a very, very angry person. I'm not angry at you. I'm just an angry person. And I think, and when I stopped smoking, and instead of inhaling a tranquilizing narcotic, I exhaled sheer rage. And I have found that rage is, for me, it's a component of writing that I would never want to do without. So I don't think, yes, I wish I were a smoker who could have a cigarette and my coffee and sit and smoke, but it's literally impossible that that could have happened.
Well, fantastic. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
We're very grateful to Maria Jose Navia, and we are inviting you because Deborah will be signing books. So please, thank you.
I just